The Diddy-Cassie case is a perfect example on why hypergamy can actually be very, very dangerous. And that's not to say that it's bad to want to be with a successful man. That's in and of itself is not necessarily bad. But the problem is a lot of the values that women are taught from very young to look to as desirable or successful or good are not necessarily values that lead to a long-lasting, healthy relationship. For example, we live in a culture that puts a big premium on a man making a certain amount of money or having a certain amount of status socially, having particular degrees, like having these tangible things that show that he is a man and ultimately is of a certain social class and can ultimately get a certain amount of attention and power. That is oftentimes what is promoted, whether it is actually said explicitly or just shown or modeled. But the thing is, that is not an indication of a healthy man or even necessarily that that man has what it takes to be in a healthy relationship. And in the case of Diddy and Cassie, I could see how a young woman coming of age could be enamored by a man who had the money, who had power, who had connections, who had the success, who ultimately had what it took to put her in front of an international audience, which is actually pretty much what he did. I could see how she could be enamored with him and why on some level she would stay so long because of all of those benefits that came with being alongside him. And that's what makes the case so complicated, right? There is obviously manipulation and control, and I'm sure that there was fear that he used of her leaving and doing certain things. That definitely played a part. But the way that she likely got sucked in was from all of those other things that he appeared to offer at the beginning. And when I'm saying that is exactly how it's like when we are dancing with the devil. The Word of God encourages young women of God specifically, to not get caught up in the values of the world or not to allow the cultural values to shape what you think, how you believe, and ultimately what you want, but to allow God's values to direct you on how to make decisions. And he's saying that because sometimes what the culture promotes as good and what the culture promotes as necessary can be the very thing that leads ladies astray. And so I will not say that it is necessarily wrong for a man or to desire a man who has success or who has money or whatever. I would just encourage women that you really want to make sure that you're not leading with that and really ask God what he has for you. Because I hear many women today, young women, still say, oh, I want a man of God. I want a God-fearing man. I hear that constantly. But the thing is, God may send you a man who isn't 6 feet tall. Maybe he's not making six figures. Maybe he's average, right? Or considered average based upon cultural standards. But he can be loving and kind and have a very good heart, or be generous, or really love God, or be discerning and wise. Like, he may have so many great qualities that in the long run are necessary and needed to have a long, healthy relationship and to ultimately build a family. But those qualities aren't necessarily valued in our culture. But those qualities are necessary for anything healthy. So I think it's a just good case study on why the values that are promoted, such as hypergamy and, the 666 man, he has to be 6 feet tall, have a six-pack, make six figures, how all that stuff ultimately doesn't really mean anything. And why when you look at men or get enamored by that can really put you in a precarious situation. And it's ultimately so much more important to allow our values to be shaped by what God is saying, and to look at men as more than just ATMs or walking ATMs who can just give us money or access, which is oftentimes what's promoted, but to remember that life is so much more bigger than that. And that we should not judge the value of a man based upon the amount of money, the amount of cars, the amount of connections that we have. And we also shouldn't envy the wicked or envy those who seem like they have that, because we don't know what they had to do to get it.